Welcome to another segment of Interview with the Expert. I'm your host, Kristen Keogh. Today I have with me author, legal marketing, and business expert Richard James. Welcome to the show, Richard.
Oh, thanks for having me, Kristen.
Okay, so I want to know, why did you decide to work with attorneys?
Well, you know, I've been a serial entrepreneur for many years. I'm a systems guy by nature, so I do things mathematically, systematically, and in the very beginning, way back when I started in insurance sales, what happened is I built a system of learning how to sell. And I loved the process of that, but I just was young and kind of dumb, and I ended up into the family business, which was the funeral business, believe it or not. I know I'll be the last one to let you down, right? But so the truth of the matter is that I loved the funeral business. It was everything about it, but I had to build systems there too because I had multiple locations. So I could only be in one place at one time, but the families that I served always wanted to work with me. It was just impossible. So I had to duplicate that professional level of service in all three locations. And while I love that business and everything about it, we realized that I couldn't hang a sign on the side of the building that said, buy one, get one free, and get any real results. Yeah. And so I ended up wanting to go into something else, and I ended up in the pet supply business of all things. So I went from insurance to the funeral business to pet supply business. Now, how does this have anything to do with lawyers? I'll get to that, I promise. But the idea is that in the pet supply business, I again had to build systems. I used to travel to China on a regular basis, and I had warehouses and forklifts and employees, and we had to make sure that we had systems for every single moving part. I like to say that I got my master's degree in systems building there. But around 2008, 2009, we specialized in aquarium ornaments, and when the recession hit, we found out that fish aren't as cool as cats and dogs because fish don't fetch. And so the recession was going to affect that business. So I started working with a guy out of a mastermind group that worked with attorneys. And he said to me, do you think that the systems that you built in my business would work for attorneys? I said, sure. So I started traveling the country, working with attorneys, kneecap to kneecap, teaching them exactly what it is I did, when one guy said to me, does this stuff really work? I said, well, yeah, it really works. And he said, well, would you like to prove it? And I said, what do you have in mind? He said, well, I have an office in Phoenix. And he said, you're in Phoenix. And if you're interested, you can come try all your crazy ideas as long as you protect my license. And if it works, you get to tell your story. And if it doesn't work, well, you get to fail miserably in a public forum. And so we started kneecap to kneecap together, him and I, building this business from $0 in sales to $3.5 million in sales in just 2.5 years. And so one thing led to another, and somebody said, hey, how did you do that for him? Can you do it for me? And voila, I was in business, right? And so we've taken all the principles of all of the things that I've learned through all of the years, including working in a law firm, and now we've applied it to this business as well, where we teach all of these principles to attorneys.
So Richard has now written 2 books, The DNA of the Autonomous Attorney and Discover the Acres of Diamonds in Your Law Firm. So Richard, are these books different? What do they cover?
That's a great question. The DNA of the Autonomous Attorney was designed to teach them how to put the proper systems into their practice, whereas the Acres of Diamonds book is showing them how to convert more of their existing leads into real actual clients. Now, the concept of the DNA book, where I'm putting systems into their practice, the reason we want to do that is to help build a law firm that supports their lifestyle rather than completely undermines it.
So what do you mean by that? Can you give me some examples?
Yeah, good question. So this idea that a lawyer comes out of law school or out of working with another law firm and decides to go open their own practice, they think, well, somebody else did it, I can do it, how hard can it be? And they think that they're going to be able to cut their own hours and they're not going to have to work as hard as they did before, or whatever their wild-eyed dreamed ideas are. And the reality is they find themselves oftentimes working 70, 80 hours a week. If they have young families, they don't see their kids, they don't see their families. It causes a lot of stress at home. Oftentimes they don't make money as quickly as they thought they were going to because they didn't have the principles. And so what I teach them is how to take basic business systems that they were never taught in law school and apply them to their practice so they can start having the practice of their dreams.
So who is this book for? The newcomer to the business or somebody who's been doing this for decades?
Yeah, so I'd like to narrow it to a specific person, but the truth is that it's for anybody who is sick and tired of being sick and tired. I mean, they've just had it. I bet you the newcomer doesn't realize that they're sick and tired just yet because they haven't experienced it. So I would say that most of our clients are people who have gone through the first couple of years, and either they're struggling to be successful, or by most people's definition, they are successful financially speaking, but they have a miserable life. Make sense?
Yeah, and do you ever find that the people who end up reading your books feel somewhat relieved when they realize they're not the only ones in the business going through this?
I tell you what, that's great insight, because I think that's the biggest aha moment for them, is they don't feel like they're so alone anymore. Somebody is talking their language. Most often we hear from people saying to us, were you kind of eavesdropping on my wife's and my conversation, or my spouse's and my conversation? And we find we attract an awful lot of husband and wife teams for that reason. My wife and I worked together for 25 years, and so we understand the pains of what it's like to work together as a married couple. And so, yeah, absolutely, they feel like they've arrived at a place that's different than anywhere else they've ever arrived before.
Do people find some financial guidance with this? I imagine that when you're in this situation, it's kind of hard to manage that part while trying to, keep the hours down in the office.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So let's break it down a little bit. So in the DNA book, as far as the systems that I talk about, we start at the very top. So the very first thing we have to get to is their why. Like, why do any of us really do this, right? Why do we do what we do? I was in a restaurant with my son the other day. He's 16, and he was going to work that night, and he looked at me and he said, "Dad, I don't want to go to work," right? He's a busboy, and he's like, "I don't want to go to work." But I want him to work to realize what work is all about. But this is what I really wanted him to know. I just looked at him and I said, "Son, do you know how you feel right now?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Make sure you find something that you love to do and that you become really good at, because otherwise you're going to feel just like that the rest of your life." I said, so let's get you really good at something you love. And for the most part, lawyers love the law. They got into it because they wanted to help people, but they didn't know why or how to accomplish that goal. So we get them back to their why and get them back to what they want their business to look like and help them to design it that way first. Then we move right into the financials. So making sure we get the numbers right, making sure we get the cash flow right, making sure we get their collections process and make sure they're charging the right number right. So yeah, we cover the math for sure.
What are some of the common issues that people come to you and say, "Please help me with this"?
Yeah, so some of the biggest things are just simply, one, I don't have enough time. So oftentimes they feel like, my son's a good example. Before he had a job, it's like, I can't get a car because I don't have a job, but I can't get a job because I don't have a car, right? And so now all of a sudden he's got the job, so he's got it moving. And for a lot of times that's what they feel like. They don't know where to start. They feel like the tail is wagging the dog and they want to know exactly where to start. So we break it down for them step by step, piece by piece. So we give them kind of like the yellow brick road, just follow, follow, follow.
How does it feel for you when you help someone make it through a tough time with their business and kind of regain the passion and remember why they're doing this for a living?
I've far surpassed the point where I have to do this necessarily, and I do it because I have a passion to work with as many like-minded entrepreneurial attorneys who actually want to take action on the things that we come up with together so they can get real, meaningful results. There is nothing more exciting than an email that I see that I wake up and I say, "Here's the results we got." Now, it's to my detriment because I'm really invested in their business. I take it personally if they fail, especially if they try. And the reality is that we all fail a little bit along the way. But the key is to fail and fall forward, right? And so that, for me, is the most rewarding part.
Here on Interview with the Expert, we talk to a lot of business owners, and it seems like they always struggle with staffing. So do lawyers have difficulty with that too? And if so, do you address that in these books?
Yeah, so lawyers are no different than any other business owner. As a matter of fact, I go as far as making a lawyer take an oath when they work with me, that they have to raise their right hand and repeat after me. Go ahead, try it. Raise your right hand.
All right.
My business is not different from yours. See, their business is no different from mine or anybody else's. So yeah, they struggle with employees and staff and management too. It's a huge part. As a matter of fact, it takes up 2 huge systems in the things that I teach because it's a massive problem. Or I should say, it's a massive opportunity. It's only a problem if done poorly. Mm-hmm. See, in any business, from an employer's perspective, there's what they think the employee is doing. There's what they want the employee to do, and then there's what the employee is actually doing, right? And so that happens in every single business, and it's usually because there's no inspection process in management.
So what do you do about that? How do you make sure that the work is getting done? How do you keep all that handled and make sure everybody's on track?
That's a good question. So we call it KPIs, Key Performance Indicators. And basically, it's how do we set up the systems so that we can get the reports in mind. So when we set up the systems, whether they be software or just manual systems, how are we doing it so that we can get the data that we want out of the backside? So when we set up a system, we don't say, well, just set up the system. No, we set up the system and say, what is this going to tell us? How often do we have to measure it? And in what way will we inspect it, right? And any system has three basic components. The first thing is we have to harvest the data. So we have to make sure we have a way somewhere to put everything. Two, we have to inspect the data by report. So that means we have to make sure that the business owner is checking to see what's going on, or they have somebody employed that's checking to see what's going on. And three, we'd like to automate it. But we're going to have to take automation and kind of put it up in the parking lot for today because we'll never get through it.
So much to talk about. And I know you get more into this in the Law Firm's Diamonds book. So tell us about that. And by the way, I like the sound of anything that has to do with diamonds.
Yeah.
So
Diamonds
it sounds like a good read
friend,
already.
Right? Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. My wife tells me all the time she loves diamonds, especially when I named the book. She was like, oh, I love that title.
Yeah,
right?
very, very catchy.
Well, here's the idea behind Law Firm Diamonds. And so there's a guy by the name of Russell Conwell. He's long passed away now, but for years and years he gave this speech about the acres of diamonds that could be found in your backyard. As a matter of fact, he built Temple University, going town to town giving this speech. And the concept is that so many people are after the bright and shiny new thing, right? But the reality is that there are acres of diamonds lying in your own business. And so what we do with attorneys is, in that book, we show them a system for them to uncover the acres of diamonds lying in their business without having to spend more money on the bright and shiny stuff of marketing. Because they're always getting some call from some guy to say, we'll get you on the top of Google, or let us show you how to do this new Yellow Page ad, or let's use this social media thing. And that's just not the best answer most times. The best answer is, how can we convert more of the leads that you already have into clients?
Can you give me an example of some success that you've had finding those diamonds?
Oh yeah, so let me, this is a great question. So here's the idea. Let me first unpack it for you so you know what I mean by that. We teach something called the perfect client life cycle. So if you can envision in your head, it's this idea that we're going to take somebody who's interested in doing business with the law firm, and we're going to call them a lead. And then the law firm has to convince that person to set an appointment to come in the office to meet with them. And then after they set that appointment, they have to get them to show up. And then after they show up, we have to convince them to retain the firm, that you're going to do a good enough job to retain the firm. And then after they retain the firm, we got to convince them to pay the bill. And then after they pay the bill, we have to convince them to refer more business to you, right? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Now, the secret to this whole thing, the system behind this, is what I call the little hinges that swing the big doors, the conversion points between it. So it's, of the leads that we get, how many conversions did we have into people who set appointments? Of the people who set appointments, how many showed up? Of the people who showed up, how many hired as a percentage, right? Of the people that hired, how many paid us as a percentage? Of the people who paid us, how many people referred us as a percentage? And the reason why this is important is so that we can identify what's working and what's not working in your business. So some people say, I just need more leads. Well, maybe that's the case, and you do need more leads. But maybe giving you more leads would be a sin, because you're doing a lousy job of converting them all the way through. Make sense? Mm-hmm. So you asked a good question and I didn't answer it at all, so I'm sorry, because you asked, do I have a specific story, right?
Yeah, that's what I want to hear. I want to hear the happy success and some of the diamonds that have been discovered in these businesses that you've helped.
Here's a good one. The firm that I was building in Phoenix. So when we first started working in that firm, we used television as a way to generate leads. Matter of fact, we used 175 different lead sources to make the phone ring. And we could tell you what the cost per lead was, what the return on investment was for every lead source with the click of a button, which was amazing in and of itself. But the real gem of the story is, when we used television in the beginning, we would generate about 8 leads for every single ad. And we went to a conference and we learned one secret that changed all the difference in the lead conversion. We went from 8 leads per ad to 80 leads per ad. Would you like to know what that one thing is?
Yeah.
Okay. So all we did was add a deadline to the process. So we went from saying, call for a free copy of our book, to call for a free copy of our book, and oh, by the way, we only have 27 left. That's all we did. And we literally made that big difference. Now, What's the point? The point isn't that we figured out that change, although that's really good information for anybody who's watching because it's a writer-downer, as I would say. But the real point is that I would not have known what was going on with those leads or that lead source if I wasn't tracking it and harvesting the data. Make sense?
Which is what you're teaching people to do.
Amen. Amen. Another great story is I had an attorney that I was working with that we teach them when they use this television ad that they should get somewhere around a 30 to 40% rate of the number of leads. When they call and ask for the book, about 30 to 40% of them should say, I want to schedule an appointment. And when he ran his ad, he had 15% say they wanted to schedule an appointment. So what was the problem? So we went and investigated it, and we were able to identify that he had average hold times of 4 minutes, right? So what was happening is people were getting on the phone and they were hanging up. And so what the real problem was one thing, and we made one change, and we went from 15% to 30%. Would you like to know what that one thing is?
Yes, can you tell me?
So that one thing was, all we did was add a call center. That's all we did. We just made sure that instead of them going into his office and answering them live when his staff couldn't keep up with the calls because he was getting like 20 calls in 10 minutes, we sent it to a live call center and we instantly changed his conversion rate. And so it was a monumental difference in his practice because we were able to do that. Make sense?
Yeah.
Good stories?
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like your book is actually full of all these little diamonds, these little gems to help people with their business.
Yeah, so the Law Firm Diamonds book is all about not only these stories that illustrate how we did it, and not only testimonials from other attorneys who have actually done it, but a systematic way to break down this conversion from lead to client without spending more money on marketing. Let's get the fundamentals right. At the basis, I'm a fundamentalist. I like to get the fundamentals right, as a lot of good teachers would say, blocking and tackling, right? We want to get the basics right. So that's what I'm all about.
Richard, you say that you are invested in your clients. So what's one nugget you can give our audience right now that they can apply to their business and see some real results?
Kristen, you put me on the spot?
Yes.
All right. So how about this? I'll give you 2 nuggets.
Okay.
All right?
I like that.
It's part and parcel of the same thing. So remember when I talked about the perfect client life cycle, this idea of getting people to show up to the appointment? I'm going to give you 2 ways that your people that are watching this show right now can actually put into their practice and get immediate results.
Great.
The first is this idea that we find so many attorneys that we work with simply don't remind their people that they have an appointment. Many do. Many will do it once. Maybe they'll call the day before. Maybe they'll call the day of. I don't know, but they only do it once. And what we found is that multiple touches works best. First, don't just make one phone call. Call the day before the appointment and even call the morning of the appointment. 2, if you can use text messaging, there's so many free sources out there on the internet these days, or low-cost sources. Use a text message because everybody gets the text message to their phone these days, right? And then 3, which is the second piece of advice, let's use direct mail. And in direct mail, let's send something called a shock and awe package. What is a shock and awe package?
Yeah, sounds
it's
intriguing.
Mysterious, right? Okay, so the idea is we're going to arrive like nobody else. The reality is most lawyers simply don't know how to run a business. That's the truth. They weren't taught. They don't understand marketing at the core basic level, so their competition are not going to be doing what I'm telling them to do right now. So what they want to do is just take something and arrive like nobody else. What do I mean? Get a big, bright, shiny envelope that looks crazy and people will wonder what's inside of it. And put inside, just basically your folder and a welcome letter, maybe a brochure. If you've got any materials like a book or a report or any kind of gadgets like free pens or anything like that, put it in there so that you arrive like nobody else. Now, we'll work together after a while on how to make that even better, but in the beginning, let's just show up. Let's try to take control of their kitchen table. So before they even come to you, they realize, wow, this guy or gal is different. And if you do those 2 things, I promise you, they are going to see an immediate result in their show-up rate. So the number of people who show up to their appointments after they book their appointments. And that is a very big number. So the number of people that set appointments is also always much larger than the number of people who show. If I could just get a small percentage of those to show up, we can make a massive difference to their bottom line.
So, I mean, you've convinced me, but, you know, what do you want to tell people about why they should trust you? Talk about your experience.
Yeah, so it's a good question. I would say that the number one reason that you should trust me is because I'm a results-based guy. But at the end of the day, the real reason you should trust me is because if it doesn't get results, we figure that out really quickly. If I'm not for you or you're not for us, we decide that we need to put value first. And so what we do is we actually give them a free consultation with us, where we invest an hour of our time working on their business, giving them real value, taking all of these principles and applying them into their practice and kind of peeling back the onion to see what's working and not working, give them advice that they can use right away, and only then, if it makes sense to them and it looks like it's going to work for them, will we invite them to do business with us. And so this way they get to figure out if we're right for them. Does that sound like a fair way to do things?
Yeah, it sounds like there's nothing to lose.
No, there's nothing to lose when you do business with us, simply because if you don't get results, we even have programs where you get your money back if you do decide to work with us and it doesn't work.
All right, Richard, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks for having me, Kristen.
Thank you for watching. As a special gift to you, Richard James is offering you free resources to use in your law firm. Just visit therichardjames.com now to access these free resources. That's therichardjames.com.